Taming the High Cost of College, Episode 86.
You have kids, they grow up, and before you know it, it's time to plan for college.
Where do you start?
How much is it going to cost?
Will you qualify for financial aid?
Should you be looking into scholarships?
When will you be able to retire?
What about student loans?
The list of questions is never ending. The good news is, all the answers are right here. Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Hello, and welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. I'm your host, Brad Baldridge. Today we have a great interview with Marie McNeely. She has earned her PhD in neuroscience, and she currently works at WashU in St. Louis. And we have a great interview in talking about what her path was like earning her PhD and getting into the kind of the hard sciences and working in the medical area, but not actually a doctor. So there's a lot of great information here. A couple episodes ago, I talked with Mr. Wickersheim there, and we talked about the psych major. So this is a great companion for people that are trying to figure out what direction to go as far as hard sciences, becoming a medical doctor, becoming a PhD, doing research, teaching, getting into industry, all the different things you can do in the sciences. I think a lot of 15, 16, 17-year-olds don't really understand all the different paths. They understand what a doctor does, and then they think perhaps you could also teach at a university. But anything other than that, for most students, they don't really understand what the options are. So I think if you've got a student that's kind of in the area but not necessarily picking exactly what they want to do yet, these types of podcasts are a great tool to help you figure things out. As always, we have show notes available at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com/86, and that's where you can get links to all the stuff that's talked about in this particular episode, as well as all past episodes. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the interview. All right, today we're sitting down with Marie McNeely. She is a instructor at WashU, and she's involved in the PT and neurology department there. Welcome, Marie.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to join you today, Brad, and hello to all your listeners out there.
Hi. All right, so before we jump into anything in particular, can you tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to do what you do?
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I'm at Washington University in the program in physical therapy and Department of Neurology, and I had kind of an interesting route to get there. So I, of course, started by going to college, which is why we're having this conversation. And then once I finished college, I went on to go to graduate school, actually at Washington University as well. And I took a more alternative career path, kind of contrary to the typical academic model. And I worked in industry for a couple of years at a managed care healthcare company here in St. Louis before accepting my faculty position where I am at WashU.
All right, so you were out in industry for a little while and then back to academia?
Yep, they roped me back in.
Okay. So I guess today I'd like to talk with you about kind of what it's like to be in the sciences and maybe in particular biology, and maybe we can touch on health sciences a little bit as well. But I think we have a lot of parents out there who are working with their students who are trying to figure out what they want to be when they grow up. So I guess let's start there and talk a little bit about your path, if you don't mind sharing. Did you know you were on your way to PhD when you started, or what was your path prior to undergrad? What were your thoughts and how did things progress?
In high school, I would say I knew I was interested in science, but I didn't really know how to make a career out of that. I kind of had this preconceived notion that, kind of like what we chatted about earlier, when you're going to go into science, you're going to be either a doctor or a college professor. And I didn't really have a sense of what else you could do with a degree in science. But when I started at undergraduate, I went to a small liberal arts school in the middle of Ohio Wesleyan University. And there, I was kind of starting off in the pre-med pathway. So I had the sense of, well, I'll go pre-med, I'll go to medical school, I'll become a doctor. That seems like a clear route with a definite job at the end of it, which is great news. But then I started actually getting involved in research while I was in college. And this kind of opened my eyes to a whole different career pathway that I really hadn't considered before. So getting involved in research, working with some of the faculty members in their laboratories, I kind of realized that there was this whole other path of going to get your PhD, a different route there, and then focusing more on research in graduate school. So this sounded pretty cool to me, but I had no idea how to go about doing it. How do you apply? How do you pick schools? How do you go through this whole process? And so the faculty members I worked with were pretty helpful. And because it was a small school, we actually didn't have graduate students there. It was all undergraduate. So I didn't have a sense of what I was getting into necessarily. But I applied to schools, ended up here at Washington University in St. Louis, and was interested in neuroscience. So those are the types of programs I was looking for. And one thing that's interesting about graduate school that I think not many people know about, and especially I didn't know about when I was getting into it, is that in graduate school, and particularly the biomedical sciences, you're provided with a stipend. And so what this means is the school, once you're accepted into the program, covers your tuition. They cover your, kind of basic living expenses, and you're able to complete graduate school without taking out any student loans in most cases, without incurring any additional debt beyond what you may have from undergraduate, which is fantastic. So that was kind of the pathway that I took there. And as I was finishing up undergraduate, I kind of was interested in getting a feel for what the industry world was like, because I think there's a lot of different career opportunities out there that, parents, you may not be aware of, or your students may not be aware of, your children might not be aware of. When you think about, it's not just a doctor, it's not just a professor, there's all these different fields like science communication, there's data analytics, there's a wide variety of fields that a science background can help you find a career in. So I actually ended up getting a really cool position. It was a health economic analyst position at a healthcare company here in St. Louis. And it was a really great experience. I kind of, once again, had no idea what to expect. This is sort of a theme going into every stage of my career. But it was a fantastic experience. And I learned so much seeing the industry side of things and really just getting a much more better understanding of insurance, which was sort of, I think, a black box for a lot of people, the healthcare side of things. But then I was sort of courted back to Washington University and I had kept in touch with a lot of people there and was kind of missing the research side of things, being able to ask these questions, kind of pursue these things that you're curious and passionate about. So I guess about 2 years now ago, I was recruited back to Washington University to join the faculty.
Right. Okay. A couple different questions popped to mind. So let's start with the financial side. You mentioned that you earned a stipend in grad school.
Mm-hmm.
Now, were you actually then working, or were you TA or RA or any of those things, which a teaching assistant or research assistant, I guess what
Sure.
those would mean for people that I don't want to use jargon here.
So this is a great question. And I think it's interesting because when you get to graduate school, depending on your program, everyone's a little bit different, but it's more like a job than it is like school. And that's something that I think is a surprise when you're going into it. And for parents, you might not realize this, but you're actually working in a laboratory. So you take some classes, particularly maybe your first year or two, but then you are really, 9 to 5, 8 to 7, whatever your hours might be, working in a laboratory, contributing to the research. You're writing papers, you're doing science. And because of this, the graduate programs, particularly, I can mostly speak to the biomedical sciences, are paying you to do work in your dissertation or your thesis lab. So it's actually all part of the position. And depending on the program, there are requirements for teaching or teaching assistantships. So I did one of them when I was in graduate school. It was one semester. I taught a couple of the classes, proctored the exams, things like that. It was not a huge time investment. But then the remaining semesters, I was just doing research in the laboratory.
Right. So I think that's an opportunity in many of the sciences and engineering and some of those areas where you can find ways to be earning money by either doing research or consulting with industry, et cetera, et cetera. So people, I think, need to be aware of that. So let's talk again a little bit about you're not really understanding where you were going. Do you feel that was the right way to do it? Because I have a lot of parents talk about my student's kind of undecided and they're going to go off and figure it out. And some parents are okay with it. And some parents are really stressed out about my student doesn't know what they want to be when they grow up, yet we're going to this school and spending a lot of money. So where do you come down in that debate, so to speak?
Definitely. I think I was very fortunate. My parents actually had not gone to college themselves, so they weren't able to advise me a lot in these matters. However, they were very trusting, I guess, that maybe they shouldn't have been when I was that age, but trusting of, me and my decisions and kind of pursuing what I was interested in. So I knew going off to college was the right decision for me, but still, once again, kind of had a thought of what types of things I was interested in, but wasn't dead set on this is the career that I want. And then going off to graduate school again, kind of not knowing what I'm getting into, but feeling like this is the right direction for me. And I think, looking back in hindsight, I don't think I would have changed anything, to be perfectly honest. I think, going to graduate school, even if I had decided not to pursue this academic pathway, even if I had, stuck with the industry route, I think that background in scientific research and that scientific thinking, the training that you get is useful in so many different fields that I think even if I wasn't, technically using my PhD, the things that the subject that I studied there, I think it still would have been useful.
Right. I think there's again, you were in industry for a while, and I think there's a lot of career opportunities that are, just about in any degree that are directly related and indirectly related. And of course, then there's the careers that don't exist yet that someone's going to learn it on the job because you're not going to go to school for it. And they're going to draw from the talent pool of someone that has something that's perhaps related.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing that people may not appreciate is that some of the things that you learn as a graduate student, things like statistics, things like in a lot of cases, computer programming to analyze your data, these are skills that are highly in demand, regardless of, what industry necessarily you're looking at.
Right. All right. So again, let's talk about the 17-year-old that's a junior and saying, I think I like science. I want to choose a career in the sciences. Probably. What kind of things do you think a student should be doing as far as helping them figure that out? Saying, I want to be in the sciences, but I don't know what direction to go. I mean, other than going off to college and just trying one, are there things that you can do in the, prior to undergrad or during undergrad to help you work that out?
Absolutely. And I will give you advice that I did not myself take. But so I would say high schoolers, if you are interested in science and think this might be a career for you, one thing that I would recommend is getting involved with science groups at your school. So if there's like a science Olympiad team or, just a science club or something that you can kind of get with like-minded people, bounce ideas off of, I think that's a great opportunity that I will admit I did not take. And then another thing would be to reach out to scientists in your area. So if there's maybe a college or a university nearby, we're really excited to talk about our work. If you are interested in my research, I want to talk to you. So don't be shy about reaching out to people, asking a couple of questions, asking them about their career path. And if they have any recommendations for you, I think, this open line of communication is fantastic in academia. Sometimes people are slow to answer their emails, but they're usually really excited to talk with you and meet with you. So maybe reach out to a couple of professors, ask them maybe if there's a shadowing opportunity, if you can just kind of come in, see the lab, walk around, follow one of their students around, or even internship opportunities. There's a lot of schools that do have summer internship opportunities specifically for high school students. And that would be not only a great opportunity for you to try it out and see if it's what you're interested in, but also fantastic to put on your resume when you're applying for college.
Okay, so you're saying when you say a lot of schools, you're talking about colleges that may offer some form of internship or shadowing opportunities for high school students.
Yep, we have a student coming into our lab probably in about a month now who's just going to do kind of a one-day shadow thing. So,
So do you also use students to wash your beakers and clean your counters and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I would say if you're getting an internship opportunity, you might be washing a lot of beakers, cleaning a lot of counters. For the one-day shadow experiences, those tend to be a little bit more fun, right? Because we're trying to show you all the cool things that our lab does in one day. So I would say that's definitely a great experience. If you're doing more of a long-term internship, you'll probably be doing something more like following the graduate students around, doing some of the grunt work that other people don't want to deal with.
Right. So I guess another interesting thing is if students and families, if you're interested in science, you need to go see what a lab looks like. Again, because if you think of the weird science movie or that dates me, doesn't it? Or whatever it might be, where they show the beakers of green liquid boiling on the Bunsen burner and it's making funky steam and all that kind of stuff is not at all what a typical lab is like.
Definitely.
So tell us a little bit about are you doing research at this point then?
I am, yes. And I would say our laboratory does not at all fit the stereotype. You will not find a single beaker. We never explode things. There are no animals. So we actually do research with human participants. We work with people with Parkinson's disease. So as I mentioned, I'm sort of at the intersection of physical therapy and neurology. So we take rehabilitation approaches to try to improve some of the movement impairments that you see in people with Parkinson's disease, things like problems with walking and problems with balance.
Right. So then you say you have human participants, so are they coming to your lab or you're going to them and then?
Yeah. So typically we have people come to us in our laboratory because we have a lot of specialized equipment there that allows us to measure movement. So we have kind of that 3D motion capture system that you see in a lot of the sci-fi kind of movies or, Avatar, things like that, those little reflective markers. We have those in the laboratory to track movement. We also have instrumented walkways and force plates and things like that we can really quantify precisely aspects of people's movement.
Okay, so then they come in, you measure how things are going, and then are you then trying to devise a treatment plan that's measuring the effectiveness of treatment and some of that type of thing?
Yeah. So some of it is just getting a basic understanding of what's going on with their movement impairments, because there's a lot, surprisingly, that we still don't know. And then a lot of it is then intervention based studies where we're maybe testing people before an intervention, collecting all this baseline data about their movement, having them go through either an exercise intervention. We've done interventions looking at some of the surgical or drug therapeutic treatments that people do and how much they help different aspects of walking and movement. And those sorts of things. Then we would test them after the intervention and then maybe a follow-up just to see how well those benefits are retained.
Okay, and then who's actually doing the work then? Obviously, you're participating, but do you have grad students? Do you have undergrad students who?
Yes and yes.
Okay, so.
So within our laboratory, I tell you a little bit about the makeup. And one thing to keep in mind is every lab is different. So you'll have some labs that are, 100 plus people. I don't necessarily recommend joining one of those as one of your first laboratory experiences because it can be overwhelming and it's hard to get the individual attention that you need a lot of times for that early training experience. So we tend to be a little bit towards the smaller side of things. So there's about 10 to 12 people in the lab for the most part. So there is the primary investigator, who is Gammon Earhart. There's myself, I'm sort of the hands-on research faculty. And then we also have Ryan Duncan as a faculty member. He's on the clinical side. So he works in the clinic part-time and then does research part-time. And then we also have 3 graduate students currently. And we have a variety of physical therapy students, people that are in the doctorate in physical therapy program who do work study in the lab to kind of earn money as they're going through PT school. And then we also have a handful of, we usually have 1 or 2 undergraduates a semester working within our laboratory as well.
All right. So those undergraduates, as an example, how did they find this work? Did you guys advertise? Or?
So typically the undergraduates actually are proactive. So they're the ones reaching out to us saying, hey, I'm interested to work in your laboratory. And then we really, really like it when an undergraduate comes in and say, hey, I'm really interested in working in your laboratory and I have this awesome idea for a project. So that's like super extra bonus there.
Right, exactly. And I guess that's the point that I wanted to drive home is you don't advertise your position and then take 20 applicants and then do a bunch of interviews and pick the best candidate. It's
right.
A much more informal. Some kid shows up one day and says, hey, I love what you're doing. I've done a little research on what you're doing. I want to participate in what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you figure out if you can find a spot for them.
Definitely. And I think that's where that communication comes in. So even if you start maybe talking to this faculty member when you're in high school, getting that relationship started, getting those doors open, or maybe they don't have a position, but they know someone who does, that kind of thing. That network is key. I know everyone says networking is everything, but it really is true. It helps so much in terms of finding these positions or identifying potential opportunities.
Right. So do you belong to professional organizations?
I do. Ones that I've joined, I actually joined when I was in college, was Society for Neuroscience. That was my first professional organization. And there are annual conferences for that. And there's a lot of resources online that you can leverage, different communities, things like that. And then the International Parkinson and Movement Disorder Society is another one that's really more specific to my field. And then there's International Society for Posture and Gait Research as well. And then at WashU, there's actually also an academic women's network that's, they have some fun events and talks and things like that are helpful.
Right. So of these organizations, would it be appropriate for college level students to participate and or high school level students to participate?
Yes. So definitely things like if your student is interested in neuroscience or your child's interested in neuroscience, something like the Society for Neuroscience, or there's like the American Chemical Society or a variety of different ones, I would say they're more appropriate to join at the college level. But I think going to a conference at the college level when you're an undergraduate student is a really great experience. It's kind of eye-opening. So on one hand, it's a great networking opportunity. You are surrounded by hundreds, maybe even thousands of scientists in this field that you're potentially interested in working with. And 2, it just kind of gives you an idea of, the scope of the research. They usually have poster sessions or talks that you can go to and, just kind of seeing all the different kinds of questions you can ask and answer in your field.
Right. And I guess the reason I'm asking some of these questions is we've done I've talked with a number of different people out there that are now talking about, again, it seems like students that are proactive, the early bird gets gets the worm, or the proactive student gets the job, the graduate position, the whatever, because they just take some initiative. And it seems like I hear that over and over again. Some of the recommendations that have come up are getting involved in professional organizations and alumni organizations and doing the job shadowing and just getting involved and participating and showing some initiative versus kind of waiting for it to come to you.
Definitely. And I think, some parents out there might be concerned, like, my kid's shy, how do they just walk up to someone and start this conversation or, send this cold call email? And I will say I am an introvert, believe it or not. I was one of the shyest people I knew in high school, but you really just have to kind of push yourself outside of that comfort zone and start making those contacts. And like I said, generally speaking, the reception is going to be very warm.
Right, exactly. And the worst that can happen is they say no and you move on.
Right. Check them off your list and move on.
So are you involved, I guess, as part of those professional organizations, et cetera, are you involved in things like LinkedIn or other a little less formal groups as well?
Sure. Yeah. So LinkedIn, I do have a profile up there. I will say I don't use it or update it very frequently, I will admit. For science, there's actually a whole other community, and it's called ResearchGate. So this is sort of like the Facebook for science nerds. So here you can actually follow researchers. You can get updates every time they publish a paper. You can send messages back and forth, request publications. So it's actually this whole science community that, I'm on that as well, which is actually pretty helpful because then you can see, follow the people in your field and keep updated on the things that they're doing.
Right. Because as you're doing research, there's other people that are doing similar or tangential research that might. So
Absolutely.
If you collaborate, you might unlock some secret that you wouldn't otherwise have understood.
Sure. Or someone might solve the problem that you've been, banging your head against the wall for months trying to do. So.
Right. Okay. Do you have any other advice, I guess, for the family, again, that's kind of looking down the road and saying, I think science is where we're going as far as things to plug into or activities to take? Obviously, like when you visit schools, there's things you should do to figure out if you're interested in the sciences.
Yeah,
as far
definitely.
as
I think,
questions to ask or things to do.
yeah, there's some questions that I would definitely recommend asking, maybe as you're going around visiting for these admissions visits or college tours, things like that. So one is to ask them about research opportunities for undergraduates. And this can be either paid positions. So I actually had a job when I was in college where I worked in a laboratory, and it wasn't anything exciting. I was literally counting zooplankton, these tiny little microscopic animals in samples. But it was a great opportunity to get exposure to the lab and also to earn a little money on the side in college. So talking about work study opportunities or different opportunities to get in the lab, and then also summer internships. So these can be really competitive, particularly if you have to apply to external schools, not the school you're going to. So if you're able to go to a school that offers these summer internship programs, that can be a good foot in the door to get, a career experience internship to list on your resume. So the school I went to, Ohio Wesleyan University, I actually was awarded one of these internships the summer after my sophomore year. And I think that then really helped me the next year to get one outside of my school. And then that looked really great when I was applying to graduate school.
Mm-hmm. Now, are you aware, a couple of the local engineering schools, as an example, they have an engineering week where students can come on campus and learn about engineering, and maybe they spend a day in each of 4 or 5 different engineering fields. They do electrical for a day, mechanical for a day, and sometimes they've recommended that for parents that are kind of struggling with, do I want to be an engineer or not? And I tell families you can give it a try, and sometimes the students walk away and say, electrical, that's my choice. I really like what I learned about electrical. I'm going to start studying electrical engineering. And other kids may come from that and say, okay, I've just decided engineering's not for me. I'm going to pick a different path. Is there similar things that you are aware of in the sciences, as far as kind of the science summer camp, the science week, the whatever?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's going to vary a little bit by school, but I know there are a lot of programs, and we have programs specifically here in St. Louis. There's like a YSPs, a Young Scientist program, where high school students have an opportunity to kind of come in and see different labs and interact with scientists. And I think these are really good opportunities, again, to test it out and maybe see what you're interested in. You might be surprised at these options you didn't realize were available. So I think those are a great. Engineering week, I think we do actually have here at Washington University as well. So another great opportunity. And another thing actually that I'd recommend is a lot of scientists run very fantastic candid blogs or podcasts. And we have one ourselves called People Behind the Science. And this podcast kind of gives you a candid look at the life of a scientist. And specifically, I mean, they talk about the things that are challenging them. They talk about their successes. You can kind of get a sense of what the life of a scientist is like, as well as the research that they're studying that might help you kind of, if you're on the fence, say, wow, field research sounds terrible. That's not something I want to do. And, not have to go through that personal experience. You can kind of learn from the stories of other people.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more about that, because you're the host of this podcast. Is that?
I am. Yes.
Okay. So you have a podcast. It's out. What's the name of it, first of all?
It is People Behind the Science.
People Behind the Science. So on that podcast, you're interviewing other scientists and talking about what their research and so forth. Is that accurate?
Sure. Yeah. So we have over 300 interviews. Each of them are with different scientists, and we don't actually focus on a lot of the details of the research, which is, I think, what makes it a little bit different from some podcasts. This one really focuses on the scientists and their story. So how did they get to where they are today? There's a lot of great career advice and information about, these are the steps that you can take to get to this specific position, if that's what you're interested in. And I think that can be really helpful for students or maybe parents out there who aren't familiar with science or aren't familiar with the science career path and where it might lead.
Right. You can just kind of get into the community, learn a little bit about what some of these scientists are doing, and they get a little bit of their backstory and what they're excited about and what they're working on and how they came to be what they're doing. And yeah, so I think that would be a great resource, especially again for parents and or students that are considering the sciences. Any other quick advice for families before I let you go?
Well, I think you kind of hit it on the head there when you said start early. I think this planning is key. And I think you're going to hear it over and over and over again, parents. And I know some of you have been planning since before your kids were even born. But, thinking about high school, I think that start early is key. So if you know your student is going to be applying for scholarships in a specific area or, maybe a leadership scholarship, making sure they're joining those groups, making sure they're getting those internship experiences or doing those shadow visits, or just reaching out and contacting people in the career or field that they want to go into. I think that is so important and can really get your student on the right track.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate all the great information, and we will put contact information into the show notes for the podcast. And if people wanted to contact you directly for one of these shadowing opportunities or whatever it might be, how would they best go about that?
Absolutely. So you can email me. My email at Washington University is McNeely, McNeely, M at wusm.wustl.edu. And I'd be happy to chat with anyone about my work or share some of my experiences as well.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. And again, we'll put that in the show notes as well, so you don't need to be trying to write that down while you're driving. And that'll all be available at our show notes. I appreciate all this great information, and we'll stay in touch.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you. All right. That was a great interview with Marie. Hopefully you learned a ton. Again, show notes are available, tamingthehighcostofcollege.com/86, which is where this episode lives on the internet. So you can go there and get links to all the things that we talked about. There's also past episodes, like the one I mentioned earlier with Robert Wickersheim as far as psychology degree, and many others that are great for students that are trying to choose career paths. We've got information on choosing a culinary path, choosing the MD path, engineering, all kinds of different ideas out there. So if you go through the past episodes, there's lots of episodes where we talk to students that are looking at different career paths and kind of what the college looks like. Because for many career paths, college isn't the typical 4 years and you're done. There may be grad school, or it may be hands-on training, or it may be internships or other on-the-job training where you're in a hospital or you're in a school doing the job as part of your education. All right, that's all we have for today. I appreciate you listening. I would appreciate it if you left reviews at iTunes, if that's how you're receiving this podcast. Or you can also go to our website at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. Thank you much, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns two companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.